let's get started. Colleen Lamonti will start with her opening statements. They will be 2 minutes apiece. When we get to the questions, the answers will be 1 minute and then 30-second responses.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Muskegon Chronicle and MLive and Muskegon Community College for hosting this event and giving us the opportunity to reach out to the voters of the 91st District. My name is Colleen Lamonti, and I am running for the Michigan House of Representatives for the 91st District. I am a high school science teacher with Muskegon Public Schools. I am a wife to my husband of 18 years, and I'm a mom to our 2 beautiful children. Yes. Oh, sure, sorry.
If all of you could do that.
My family and I are originally from the other side of the state. We ended up over here because my husband lost his job in the automotive industry while I was a stay-at-home mom. We immediately put our house up for sale, trying to do the right thing, and we lost our house to foreclosure because of his job loss. It was a hard time, and we ended up living with my mom for 1.5 years as we tried to get back on our feet. This reality is what I feel that we need to get back in Lansing. As a teacher and a mom, I have personally seen the effects of the damaging legislation that has come out of Lansing in the last few years. I have seen my class sizes get bigger. I have seen how that affects the students in my classes. I have seen how their families are affected by some of the policies that have been put into place. We need to get back to having good quality education in our state. We need to be not shifting our tax burden onto middle-class families and seniors while we give huge tax breaks to corporations with no strings attached. We need to get back to getting good paying jobs back in our state. Jobs that you can actually support a family on. And we need to be able to have good protections for the environments, for our environment in our state. This is what I plan on standing up for when I'm elected. These are the things that I think are important to our community. And that's what I plan on doing. Thank you.
Nick?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm quite possibly Liberty's least eloquent defender. But on this stage, I assure you I am her only defender. I hope to save you from the embarrassment and frustration of watching 2 candidates pretend to disagree with each other. To the extent they disagree, it is only in management objectives, or to what degree your life ought to be managed. Both of these candidates are arrogant enough to think that they're qualified to spend your money on something as frivolous as a film subsidy. They hope that you'll believe they are doing something to help the economy. The simple arithmetic goes like this. You steal money from some people, called taxpayers, and give it to other people, called movie executives, and hope that people called voters notice only the new jobs created and forget about the jobs destroyed by the taxation used to give money to the film executives. This is what Americans used to rightly call corruption. You would see it immediately that it was immoral if it were done by any other entity than government. You would think that Mrs. Hughes' business experience and Mrs. Lamonti's mathematics background would tell them that this won't work. You can't take money from some people, siphon off half for overhead, and then give it what remains to other people and expect a net economic gain. Good jobs are created by free people in the pursuit of happiness and profits, not by government edict. No one here, I suspect, would argue that it is a good idea to bring about full employment by abolishing the use of farm machinery. Yet, that is exactly the premise on which the windmill subsidy is based. This sort of irrationality can and has only ever led to poverty. I hope to bring some semblance of reason to Lansing. I hope you'll all join me. My name is Nick Sundquist. I thank you for your attention.
Holly?
Hi, I'm Holly Hughes, seeking your vote for re-election for state representative. I was raised in Muskegon County. I'm 4th generation Muskegon County. My kids are the fifth. I'm a former school board member and township trustee for 12 years. Our family business is Master Tag, and my husband Rick and I have two beautiful daughters, Morgan and Taylor. I was frustrated by a few years ago when Indiana took 500 of our jobs. Cisco tried to put a plant in Michigan, and they almost got their permits, took a year, and Indiana processed them in 48 hours. That was 500 jobs that moved 32 miles south of where they were going to be in Michigan. Jobs is the number one issue. I know firsthand what it takes to create jobs. Jobs is the key to everything that we need and want, like education, fire, police, and infrastructure like roads and public services. The first week on the job, I worked with Eagle Alloy to get their MEDC grant, and they hired hundreds of people as a result. Today, we also visited ADAG, who's hiring a lot of people as well, along with Port City. Even Rikey's Bakery has gone from 16 to 44 employees. Michigan veterans rate right now is 29% unemployment. That upset me so bad that I talked to Dave Ealing at the Muskegon Vet Center, and we held the first ever Veterans Job Fair on the LST. We had 900 people come through with 67 businesses. It was so successful that we're going to do it again next year. I voted for a bill to reduce income taxes and increase the deduction for hardworking families that took effect October 1st. $1,000 for a family of four, 4.3% to 4.2%, and we hope to increase that as we go along. Today, Michigan has a stronger economy than it did 2 years ago. Michigan is the fifth fastest decline in state unemployment, above the national average, and our business climate is such that we went from 49th to 7th above the national average. I hope to earn your support on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Welcome, and thank you for participating in this event, and thank you for putting yourself forward for public office. We'll begin with that economic issues, and we'll start with Nick. What should the state's role be in job creation? What will you do if elected to generate jobs in Muskegon County?
I guess the premise here that the state has some role in job creation is, in my opinion, flawed. I think that if you have liberty and justice, what do they do in this country before they had government grant programs to get employers? If you try and start a business in Michigan today or in Muskegon County, you'll be confronted with an army of bureaucrats waiting to tax you and try to figure out what ways they can make your life miserable. If they, seriously, one of the things I'd like to do in order to help create jobs is get rid of the Michigan Department of Economic, Michigan OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Office. This is a tax collecting agency. They're not doing anything in the interest of safety. Insurance companies already do the job, and it's silly to think that you're not smart enough to know you're working in unsafe conditions. Thank you.
Holly, same question.
Can you repeat the question?
What should be the state's role in job creation, and what will you do if elected to generate jobs in Muskegon County?
Well, I think we've done that. Making sure regulation aren't too stringent. The Cisco example is a good example. Work's not done at 5 o'clock when you're trying to process permits. Businesses need to have that knowledge that the taxes that they're expecting to pay will remain the same, and that we have a climate that says we're open for business. And I think that's what we've done, and you're seeing that with the stats that I quoted earlier, where the business climate went from 49th to 7th in the nation, fifth fastest decline in state unemployment above the national average. I think that's pretty good, and I can see an improvement here in our own town.
Colleen?
I would say that if you look at our unemployment rate, we've seen it gone up the last 4 months in a row. If we were going to see jobs created by the policies that are being enacted right now, we would have seen them at this point. I'd like to see us get back to some incentive programs that would actually reach out to manufacturing and industries and tell them, listen, you bring good paying jobs to our state, you invest in our state, a state that we have a wonderful skilled workforce. We have a beautiful area that you would love to raise your children in. Come and invest in our state, and we'll give you a tax incentive for that. I think that's the way that we're going to draw in the kind of jobs that we need for our Michigan citizens. Jobs you can actually support a family on, not an $8 or $9 an hour part-time job like we see in our want ads right now. We need to get jobs that you can have people that are going to become the customers for our businesses.
Starting with Holly, anybody have a response to 30 seconds if anyone would like to jump in on anything said? Go ahead.
I think this demonstrates perfectly the point I made in the opening. Holly Hughes says we've got programs in place to bring employers to Michigan, and Colleen Lamonte says, let's get more programs. How about just letting the companies operate freely without all the permitting processes and all the other silly nonsense that goes on in working, trying to open a business? Thank you.
Holly?
Oh, I think you have to have a certain amount of regulation and make the climate better with taxes that you know what they're going to be. You've got to have a stable situation. In Michigan, we haven't had that, and we have that now. And that shows by our credit rating and the increase, as I said before, the business climate, 49th to 7th, and that's important for the businesses, not only the business to attract here, but the businesses that are here, because most of our expansions are businesses that are already here.
Colleen?
I would say that I think if you ask Michigan families out there, and as I've been talking to people at the doors, they might disagree. I think they're out there looking for jobs. They're looking for those good paying jobs, and they're not finding them. And I think we need to put programs in place, go back to some programs that we're actually working to get the good paying jobs here in our state.
Starting with Holly on this question, does the state have a role in the development of properties such as the former paper mill known as the Sappy property on Muskegon Lake?
Absolutely. I've worked on many pollution sites. In fact, I got an award for my work on Tannery Bay. We started in 98. I testified before the House and the Senate. We got the only resolution passed for full cleanup of Tannery Bay that was signed by the governor. We need to do the same kinds of things for Sappy and develop it. Where else do we have such an opportunity to do cleanup and have such a great expanse? In fact, met with some business people this afternoon on that very issue.
Colleen?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Does the state have a role in the development of the former paper mill property known as the Sappy property on Muskegon Lake?
I would definitely say yes. I would agree with this. I think that we absolutely could have our state come in and help with the development of, with our programs, with pollution sites. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are holding those companies that come into our state and pollute accountable. We have seen legislation passed in the last 2 years that has eased up the regulations on corporate polluters, allowing them to decide when a site that they have come in and polluted is cleaned up enough. I would say we need to make sure that we've got regulations back in place so that we can make sure that corporations are held accountable for their pollution sites.
Nick?
I don't really think that the state has any interest in Mr. Melching's property other than to the extent that Mr. Melching's willing to cooperate with them. Thank you.
Any response back, Holly, and then
I think we owe a responsibility to our people to clean up when there is such a pollution problem. I've had to deal with Hooker Chemical, Koch Chemical, DuPont, Tannery Bay. This site needs to have some attention, and we owe it to our people to do so.
Colleen?
I would agree, and I would ask my opponent why she voted to reduce the regulations that were in place to make sure that corporations are held accountable for the pollution that they put in place.
And Nick?
I've already answered the question. Thank you.
I'd just like to say good evening to the candidates and to our guests. This next set of questions is related. The first one will be a two-part question. So I'll ask both parts to the same person, then we'll move on to the next one. The first question is, should the state continue to pursue education reform that would expand non-traditional schools such as charter and online schools? And we're going to start with you, Colleen.
I would say that as we continue to see the undermining of our public school system through the expansion of charter schools and corporate-run cyber schools, we are going to continue to see our public education in our state continue to slide. We have got to become a leader in education for our state. This is not acceptable that we are going to cut the funding for education programs across the state and at the same time open it up for corporations to come in, profit-driven corporations to come in and make a buck off of the backs of our kids. We need quality public education in our state, and this is what I'm going to be supporting.
All right. Nick?
Yeah, I think we absolutely need to pursue some drastic reforms in public education. In fact, I think we ought to privatize public schools and have separation of school and state for the same reason we have separation of church and state. I'm telling you, if you gave a $7,000 voucher to the parent of every child out there, you'd improve school quality and cut about a quarter of the state's budget. About 45%, I think, of the state's budget is spent on education. And Muskegon Catholic Central, the highest tuition there is $6,500 per year. The state of Michigan spends close to $13,000 per student. That's not only the foundation grant, that's also the taxes that you pay, and the federal money that comes into the state is included in all of that. You can find that information readily at the Mackinac Center. Thank you.
Well, I don't agree with Mr. Sundquist on that. I think we do need public education. My kids were publicly educated, so was myself, my whole family. I have teachers that are in our family as well. I believe in public education, and I also believe in choice. I fought hard last year. I voted twice against the cuts. In fact, they wanted an omnibus budget. We broke it off and had a piece that was just education, and we were able to get more money for lower class size, the $13.9 million, which we retained this year. I voted against the cut they proposed this year, and then voted for the $120 increase that brings us closer to parity with the east side. As Mr. Sundquist pointed out, the east side has higher tuition they get per pupil than we do, and we need more parity and more equality in that. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to ask the second part of this question, although you may have already answered it. Bear with me. But one of our readers suggested a question and wanted to know if we should just hand our schools over to for-profit companies. And Colleen, I'll start with you again.
Sure. I do not agree with this. We need quality public education in our state. The way that we're going to ensure that we have equitable education for all of our students, not just students that fit the bill, but for all students, is by having public education. As we continue to erode the quality of our education by siphoning off students to charter and cyber schools, we're going to continue to see our education decline. We need to make sure that we are investing in our kids. Our state has two main priorities: the safety of our citizens and the education of our children. I don't see that we can subject our children to corporations that are simply going to look to make profits on them.
Thank you. Nick?
All of the wonderful things that we have in this company are provided by companies that are trying to make a profit. The idea that it would be any different if it because of the public schools, because they were educating children, I find a little bizarre. Frankly, both of these women are talking about equity. I've just suggested equity. And the beautiful part about a voucher system is that parents of special needs children don't have to fight with a state legislature and a school board to get their kids into quality Montessori type schools. Right now, we've got a situation where we probably spend more money on sports complexes than books. The management of public schools is abominable. It's just silly to me that it came out recently in the Chronicle that Mona Shores was so bad, the budget there, that they had to get rid of the operations director and his 2 assistants. Thanks.
I think we have some excellent schools here in Muskegon County that I'm very proud of, and I don't think that they should be turned for profit. I think what you're referring to is what happened in Muskegon Heights. They had a $13 million deficit. In a situation where we have our kids there, which is part of our community, it's part of our responsibility and duty constitutionally to educate our kids. And right now, they are at the bottom for graduation. That's not right, and we need to correct that. And so when you're in an emergency situation, that's where we're at, and the Heights wanted help, and they knew they needed help. Thank you.
Would anybody, I think you've kind of responded, but would anybody like to respond to anything that was said? All right, let's go on to the next question. The next question is related. How should schools be funded? And Nick, I'd like to start with you.
The question is, how should schools be funded? Yeah. Ideally, they'd be funded the same way everything else in the capitalist system is funded. You pay for what you get. Until we can get to a system where we develop enough private schools to have a successfully functioning private or voucher system, the state would grant each parent a voucher for a set amount of money and tell them to send their kid to school where it made most sense for them. How are they funding schools now? By taxes. Thank you.
Holly?
Could you repeat the question again?
The question is simply, how should schools be funded?
I think that we're doing quite well right now, honestly. And I'm hoping that the job climate will get better, as it has been, and so we can spend more on education.
Thank you. Colleen?
Well, I would say that right now we fund our schools based on Proposal A that was voted in 1994. And what we see is that this worked really well when we had strong economic times. What we're seeing right now is the failure of the funding when we have down economic times. Proposal A is something that I think that we could take a look at as a state. And I'd like to chair a board that would actually bring together leaders of our public schools, that would bring together economists and other stakeholders to look at how do other states that have quality education and good, secure funding for the education, how do they do it? And if we need to bring some of those ideas here to our state to make sure that we can ensure that we've got good education funding, then let's do those.
All right, thank you. Would anybody like to respond to anything that's been said? All right, thank you very much.
We move on to taxes. In 2010, the tax burden has been eased on businesses and increased on pensions, lower income citizens. Is the state policy on taxes out of balance? Holly?
I think we made great progress, as I can point out again how we are with the increase in business climate from 49th to 7th. I would like to see a couple changes. I know that the governor doesn't agree with tax credits. I would like to see some of our tax credits back. Those are some of the things that we lost. As far as pension, right now it's 67 and above. You have no tax. There is a $20,000 exemption for single, $40,000 for a couple. that exempts Social Security and exempts military pay as well. Having said all that, if I had a chance to remove it, I would.
Colleen?
I would say that we have seen in our state the shifting of our tax burden from our corporations onto our seniors and middle class. Now, I know that for a middle class retired couple, the pension tax has meant almost $3,000 a year for them. Now, this may not be a lot of money for my opponents, but this is a lot of money for seniors. This is, for some of them, the choice between putting food on the table or paying for the prescription drugs that they need. We need to stop putting our tax burden onto those that can least afford it. We need that money in our middle class, and we need it in our seniors and our retirees so that they can be the customers out there helping out our small businesses in our community. When they've got money in their pockets, they're going to spend it, and it's going to help our economy grow throughout our community.
Nick?
Michigan taxpayers are just plain overtaxed. The state of Texas has a legislature that meets for 4 months every 2 years. They have a 6% sales tax, and they manage to run their state quite well on that 6% sales tax. There's no income tax, and there's no corporate tax. Michigan is just mismanaged. Thank you.
And your response back, Holly? Colleen? Nick? Next question in the area of taxes, starting with Colleen. How would you change or replace the current personal property tax if you would? It's the tax that businesses hate, but the major funder of local governments, a major funder of local governments. Personal property tax.
I would not support repealing this tax until we found another revenue source for this. Our communities, our cities and townships depend on this revenue so that they can have the money they need to pave our roads and take care of our sewer systems and water treatment systems and to put police and firefighters out on the streets. These are things that cost money, and we need to have that revenue there so that we can have a safe, secure environment in our cities and communities, and so that we have the infrastructure that we need for our citizens. We are not going to draw new business to our state or any of our communities if we undercut our cities and townships' ability to provide the infrastructure that businesses are looking for and the safety that we need on our streets for their businesses.
Nick?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
How would you change or replace the current personal property tax? It's a tax that businesses hate, but it's one that's a major funder of local services.
I would just abolish it, get rid of it entirely. We don't need it. I think that you could cut away whole chunks of government. We can get rid of the Michigan Department of Occupational Health and Safety. If we went to a part-time legislature, that would you'd save millions of dollars. Not only would you save millions of dollars on legislature salaries and their staffs and offices and all the rest of the things incident to that, but you'd also save millions of dollars because people wouldn't be in Lansing writing silly rules and regulations that businesses have to comply with. Thank you.
Holly?
Oh, personal property tax. We're looking at that right now. We actually had the Lieutenant Governor come in today and talk about it. They're not talking about removing all personal property tax. They're talking about approximately a third of it with manufacturing equipment to be more competitive with Indiana. In fact, we were at Port City today, and they said that Indiana, John Essex said that Indiana offered them a building, I think it was 320,000 square feet, I forget how much, but it was a big building for $1. He's dedicated to our town. He's not up for that. I can tell you that whatever happens, we're going to look for a replacement income. It is a big, huge problem for cities like City of Whitehall. It's 42%. And for others, it's maybe 1 or 2%. It depends on where you are. 42% for the City of Whitehall because you have Alcoa Howmet. And as far as benefits and wages, we cut our pay was cut by 10%. We cut our office by two times and got rid of lifetime benefits for legislators past year. Thank
Any
you.
responses, Colleen, Nick? Go ahead.
Did they disagree with each other on this? Thanks.
I think one way that we did disagree with each other is that, I think that we need to be making sure that we are supporting our townships and communities. We've seen the revenue sharing cut dramatically for our cities and townships, and honestly, they can't take any more. We need to have police and firefighters out on the streets, and every time you cut a police or firefighter off the street, that's another person that no longer has a job. That's another person who can no longer support our economy.
I would say that you're right, Nick. We do agree on this. As a township official, revenue sharing, we've taken enough cuts over the years, over the past decade or so, that we can't afford to give up any more because of police and fire, et cetera, and services that we as a government's job is infrastructure, and roads and fire and police and so forth are important, and we can't take a bigger hit on that again. Thank you.
All right, thank you. This next set of questions, each one is an individual question that is basically directed at each of the candidates. So you won't all be answering the same question this time. And Holly, I'd like to start with you. When you ran for office in 2010, you told the Chronicle editorial board that if it came down to choosing what is good for the district and following the party line, that you were going to pick the district every time. And I'd like to know how you grade yourself on that. How have you done on that?
I voted against my party on a couple of environmental bills, and trying to think, I don't have the list right in front of me, but I have, and I've challenged them. I challenged them last year when we organized, I personally helped organize 24 legislators so we could break off part of that bigger omnibus budget so that we could look just at education. We held them up and were able to bargain for more. I asked for another $100 per student, didn't get it, so I voted against it, even though we got some concessions from that negotiations. I don't think I made leadership happy when I challenged them that way and when we organized those people, but I went from office to office, and we made sure that happened.
Thank you. Any response from the other two candidates?
Well, I would say I would have hoped that that my opponent would have been able to use more of her influence within her own party, being the former Republican chairwoman for our state, that she would have been able to influence more members of her party to actually support education. And we haven't seen that. We have seen our education funding cut dramatically. We have seen a charter school expansion and cyber school expansion.
Okay. Colleen, this question is for you. If you are elected, the chances are that you're going to be a member of the minority party. How will you reach across the aisle, or will you be able to reach across the aisle to accomplish your goals for Muskegon County?
You know, I hear this a lot, and this is truly about what needs to be done for our middle-class families. This is about the issues that we are facing as a state. These are not right-wing Republican issues. These are not left-wing Democratic issues. These are problems that we need to solve together. And I hope that as a new person coming in without a whole lot of political baggage dragging along behind me, that I'm going to be able to come to the legislature and reach across that aisle and say, listen, these are issues that are important. We have got to roll up our sleeves, find what it is that we have in common, and then look at what we can both compromise and get the hard work done. We can no longer have the partisan bickering that has been going on in our state, and these are the things that I'm going to work for.
Yeah, any response to that?
Well, I have worked across the aisle where we can, and we have common ground when it comes to our veterans and making sure we need the help that we need to work with them. I've also worked with Representative Rutledge, Representative Hobbs, Representative Maureen Stapleton from the other side of the state, so forth, to make sure we had what we needed for our vets, and not only for our veterans, but on education bills as well.
Nick, did you?
If I might, it looks to me like they're working together quite well. And the taxpayers all suffer for it.
Nick, this question is for you. How does a third-party candidate work within a two-party chamber? Would you join a caucus, or how would?
I suspect that I would have to work in some issues with the one party and on other issues with the other. I suspect I'd be more in line with the 2 or 3 Republicans in the House that actually care a whit about liberty. If a miracle happens and I'm elected, I hope to be able to say the sort of things that I'm saying to you all in the House of Representatives. Thank you.
We're going to go back to a question that I'm going to address to all 3 of you. This one is about women's issues, which have generated a lot of debate in the current House. When it comes to voting on legislation which would give women autonomy over their lives and livelihood, where would your allegiance lie? How would you describe your allegiance? And Holly, I'll start with you.
Well, equal pay would be great. And making sure that our women and women's issues are held to a quality standard that are safe, especially medically.
I would say that we need to make sure that we are actually supporting a woman's right to have complete control over their financial security for their families. And these are the things I'm going to be standing up for and fighting for. We cannot continue to see women's rights eroded like we have seen in the last couple of years.
Thank you. Nick?
I guess I'm not sure what the question is exactly. Could you be more specific?
Well, I can repeat it, and then, because I'm not exactly sure where you want me to go with it, but let me repeat it, and then we'll go
Please.
from there. The question is about women's issues, and it says when it comes to voting on legislation which would give women autonomy over their lives and their livelihood,
I think women have as much autonomy over their lives and livelihoods as men do. How about we write laws that are for everyone? Treat people equally. Thank you.
All right. Any responses from the panel?
I would say that as a man, it kind of shows how out of touch he is with women's issues.
We're going to ask the audience not to remember, no applause until the end. All right.
Going a little different direction. Current practice on the Badger Cross Lake Ferry is to dump its coal ash into Lake Michigan and has been for more than 50 years. That obviously is a controversial issue before the EPA, but also has implications in state environmental law. What role should the state play in that debate, and where would you come down on it? And we'll start with Colleen first.
I would say that the Badger has had years to come into compliance with EPA regulations as far as dumping its coal ash. We're talking about, this is ash that is laden with heavy metals. This is ash that continues to pollute our Great Lakes. We cannot allow this to continue to happen. Not to mention that that puts the ferry that we currently have running out of Muskegon at an economic disadvantage to the Badger up in Ludington. We need to level the playing field and make sure that everybody is following the rules and making sure that our lakes are kept clean and pristine.
Nick?
I guess I don't see the problem. They've been dumping that coal ash in the lake for years. Is there any evidence that it's hurt anything? And I'm sure that the people from the Badger felt the same way when they subsidized the Cross Lake Ferry here in Muskegon. Thanks.
Holly?
I would like to see the gas conversion, actually. And unfortunately, it's been a federal issue because you have multiple states involved when we're dealing with the Great Lakes. So you would have to go to Congressman Huizenga and our senators Levin and Stabenow, et cetera, which has been looked at over and over again.
Any other response off of that? We'd like to move to the ballot proposals and say that these were proposals that were before the state legislature, what your positions would be on that. And we'll start with Nick, and for all 6, we just need, I'm going to mention what they are, I just need a yes, no, or I don't have an opinion on it. And we'll go through Nick, Holly, and Colleen on all 6 of those. We'll start with the Emergency Financial Manager, Proposal 1. Nick, how would you suggest that you would vote if it was in the legislature?
I suspect that I would vote against it just on principle. I think that the townships and schools ought to just go through bankruptcy the same as anybody else that's failed. And I suspect that the emergency managers are in place to keep the failing systems working just a little bit longer. And that's my opinion.
Yes or no, but we'll let you put a sentence or two on that. Holly, number 1 proposal on
I'm sorry.
emergency federal manager.
It's okay. Yes, and I don't think we should force our schools to go through bankruptcy because we're constitutionally obligated to educate our children, and we can't put them through that. Thank you.
Colleen on Proposal 1.
I would vote no. This is a violation of our democratic values, and we need to make sure that we are not taking away the power of our community and our elected officials through this emergency financial manager law.
Nick, Proposal 2 is to put collective bargaining rights into the state constitution. Your position would be?
Absolutely not.
Holly?
To change 175 laws constitutionally all in one fell swoop is a no answer.
Colleen?
I absolutely support working families, and I support this budget or ballot proposal. This is about making sure that we have the ability to negotiate for the things that we need on the job.
Proposal 3 is the 25 by 25, 25% renewable energy by the year 2025. Nick?
I think it's a silly idea.
Holly?
We're halfway there with the 10%. I think that's a great goal for alternative energy. At this time, I don't think we can afford the 25-25. I think it will put our state in financial problems and raise our electric rates. We need to get to the 10 first.
Colleen?
I do support this proposal, and actually, it's actually written right into the proposal that electric rates can't go up by more than 1% a year. We need to be moving forward as a state on this, and we need to get the infrastructure in place to be ready for alternative energies.
Proposal 4 is the Michigan Home Health Care Council and putting the home health care workers' collective bargaining rights into the Constitution. Nick?
This doesn't belong in the Constitution. This whole thing is a money laundering scheme set up by Jennifer Granholm to help the Democrat Party. What they're doing is taking union dues from people that get paid a stipend from the state to take care of their own sick relatives at home. The SEIU is a big supporter of the Democrats. Has no place in the Constitution. Thank you.
It's going to, 4 is for health care?
4, yeah.
Yes. The money that's allocated by our state right now goes to families to take care of their families, and to take money away from them to support this is not a good idea, although I do support a registry so that we can make sure that there's safe care workers in homes.
Colleen?
If their families are working on
Number
this.
4 on home health care.
I do support this ballot proposal. I support the idea of having the registry so that you know that you have certified people coming into your home. And it's also going to make sure that these workers are guaranteed safe working conditions as well.
Ballot Proposal 5 is a supermajority, a 2/3 by the legislature for any tax increases. Nick?
I like the idea, but I think I would probably vote against it just on principle. It doesn't. I don't think this is something that belongs in the Constitution.
Holly?
That would give minority rule, and we're a country and a state of majority, and why give a billionaire a chance to just have to deal with a few senators or whatnot, so I'm a no.
Colleen?
I actually agree with Holly on this. This is about a super minority, not a super majority. And you'd have 13 people, 13 votes that are much easier to influence than it would be for half of the legislature.
Proposal 6 is for the International Bridge, and the proposal calls for a public vote for that. Nick?
in this particular case, I think I would vote for it. The legislature already said no on the bridge. The governor's doing this on his own decision, and I think the people have a right to take a look at it.
Holly?
I would have liked to had a chance to have a vote on this, but the only way we would vote is if money was actually spent. That's what we're there for. We have not seen this on the floor. The problem with the bill is, right now, as it stands, it wouldn't be just this bridge. It would be any bridge built in the state of Michigan. It was flawed in how it was written, so I'm a no.
Colleen?
I do not support this ballot measure. This is about getting a good transportation system across our state, and so that we can get our goods to port. This is going to help our farmers here in West Michigan, and I support the second bridge.
Let's go back at the proposals, and we'll start with Nick. Is there one that is most significant to you, and why?
I think the 25 by 25 is most significant to me just because it's the craziest idea ever. As I said in my opening, you could get full employment today by outlawing farm machinery. Everybody recognizes that's a silly idea. If you raise energy rates, all of the companies that use enormous amounts of energy, big employers, are going to go someplace else. In Spain, they've done studies that have shown that for every job created in the windmill industry, 3 to 10, depending on how you do the study, are lost. This isn't a good idea. In Denmark, where they actually have a long history of using windmills, they can't get more than 20% of their power from windmills, because anything more than that it's you have to keep the coal-powered plants running anyway, because the wind doesn't blow all the time.
Holly, one proposal that you would feel the strongest, and why?
Just a comment. This isn't the one I feel the strongest about, but it would send us into an economic tailspin, is you'd have to have coal plants back up to 25. You still would have to build those and have the lines do it, because wind blows off peak. I know a lot about that issue, but I think the most important one, I think, would be possibly 5. To have minority rule is not in our democracy of our country or our state.
Colleen?
For me, the most important one is Proposal 2, protecting working families. This comes down to what we actually have as a priority, what we value as a community. And I value the ability of our firefighters to negotiate for the safety equipment they need so that they can run into a burning building and save the people inside. I value the ability of a nurse to negotiate for her patient load so she's not overburdened with too many patients under her care and can give all of her patients the quality care that they need. I value the ability of a teacher to negotiate for their class sizes so that they can ensure that they have the time that they need to get around to all the students who need their help. You know, we pay good lip service to valuing hard work in our country. And it is about time that we have the ability to negotiate for good, decent wages for that hard work.
All right, we have come to our last question, and we folks over here are going to take a step backward and remove ourselves, because what we have asked the candidates is if they were going to ask one of their one of the other candidates a question, what would it be? So we give each of you a chance to ask one of the other candidates a question of your choosing. And Holly, we'll start with you.
I guess my question would be for Colleen about what your jobs plan would be to expand jobs in the state of Michigan.
I think we need to get back to incentive programs where we reach out to different manufacturing and industries, ones that are going to bring good paying jobs for our state, and say to these industries, come and invest with Michigan. We've got so much to offer here. Let's get you working here in Michigan. Let's bring the jobs here for our state, and we're going to see that multiply throughout our communities. When we get more people earning decent wages, we're going to have people that are going to go and be the customers that our small business owners need to get their businesses back to be thriving again.
All right. Any response to that?
Well, I think that's the old way of doing it that hasn't been working, and I think that what we've been doing here in the state of Michigan is moving us forward, and I think the stats show that.
Isn't that what they've been doing all along? Incentive programs? They give money to Cabela's to come in to compete with Jay's Sporting Goods that has the same number of square feet. It's not just to take money from some people and give it to others. Thanks.
Colleen, do you have a question for one of your opponents?
Sure. My question is for Holly. You and your party have sent out thousands of mailers, robocalls, television and radio ads claiming that I'm going to raise property taxes. And I know that you know, if you remember from 8th grade government class, that as a sitting representative, we have no control over raising property taxes. This is voted on locally by the people. Now, I know that you know this. So are you going to continue to stand behind your party as they continue these attacks against me? And how do you propose that we have good funding for our schools?
Well, the answers to that is jobs. And jobs is the answers for everything that we need or want for our families, for police and fire, for infrastructure, et cetera. We need to concentrate and stay focused on jobs, as we have been, to make sure that Michigan is looked at as a state that's open for business, where companies that are here want to expand here, and where new companies want to come as well. As far as what the Michigan Republican Party or the Democrat Party, it's had a long history of they do what they want to do. And as far as the property taxes, they feel that they saw that on some questionnaire that you filled out. I don't have control over them, as you don't have control over your party with their mass mailings, because it's illegal to coordinate.
Right. Any response to that reply?
Well, I would say a lot of the information that's been coming out, the negative information, has been through robocalls. And since there's no way to identify who is making the robocalls, I can only assume that they're coming from your campaign.
I've not made any robocalls. If there were robocalls, it would be on my report.
Right. Nick, do you have a question that you would like to address to one of your opponents?
I do. My question's for Mrs. Lamonte. In response to a question at the JC Candidate Forum, you said that Representative Brown had been censured simply for using the correct anatomical term vagina. The comment she made was, "I'm flattered you're so interested in my vagina, but no means no." Were you intentionally obfuscating this issue, or were you just misinformed? Do you believe that likening a bill designed to protect vulnerable women from men that might want to coerce them into having an abortion they don't want and to fully inform them about the procedure they are considering to violent date rape is appropriate? And if you have read the bill, what part of it do you consider an extension of the so-called war on women?
I think when we look at that whole situation, what we saw there was a backwards vote taking us back to the Dark Ages. This was not about protecting women. This was about taking away a woman's ability to make choices over her own body. It also was about taking away the funding for the clinics that so many of our poor women count on for the health care needs that they need. Women who do not have insurance that need to go get their pap smears and mammograms and other gynecological treatments, and they count on these facilities for those services. With the funding bill that they were looking at, they were going to take away the funding, and we were going to end up with these clinics are going to get closed down.
Do I have a rebuttal here? Absolutely none of that is true. I encourage you to go to the Mackinac Center, MichiganVotes.org, and look at the bill for yourself. I have a copy here for anybody that's actually interested. Thank you.
This concludes the debate tonight. Again, thank you very much for coming. I'd like to give a round of applause to our candidates.